I'm good.
All right, at this time, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the City Council Technology and Utilities Subcommittee for Tuesday, June 13th, 2023. Mr. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Counsel Janess.
Here.
Counsel Mercia.
Here.
Counsel Noon. Here. 3 present.
All right. Thank you. The one item on the agenda tonight is discussion of a potential cybersecurity ordinance for the city of Lowell. I'd like to also recognize Councilor Gitcher has joined us here in the chamber tonight. And we are joined by MIS Director Moran Fernandez and City Solicitor Corey Williams. So thank you all for being here tonight. I'll open this up to anyone who wants to start, or I can give my thoughts as to why I made the motion, however we want to move forward. Okay. All right. So shortly before this motion was filed originally, we had some discussion on the council floor about another ordinance that's on file here in the city that has to do with our accounting practices that will, adhere to generally accepted accounting practices, will have outside audits, all that kind of good stuff. And we don't have anything like that for our information enterprise at this time. And as we've seen over the past couple months, our information is important. Owning our information is important. Making sure it's secure is important. And having some structure around that seems like it might be a good way for the City Council to support the MIS workers and everyone else who works in the city in their day-to-day tasks, and making sure that what they do is secure and making sure that the residents' data is secure. So as I thought about this and tried to figure out a way that we could structure something that would be both productive and also not something that would get in the way, but something that would help, I started thinking about all of the cybersecurity frameworks that are out there in the market that are used by different companies and government organizations and everyone else, things like the ISO standards, the NIST standard, HIPAA High Trust, et cetera. There's a whole bunch of them out there. They all do kind of a similar thing of helping organizations secure their data. They all do them in a slightly different way. Some are more prescriptive than others. Some are more accepted for a publicly traded company or someone who's working in organizations that's working with financial data, et cetera, or healthcare data. And our organization kind of intersects all of that. We have a lot of that data stored in different parts of the enterprise. So I'm not sure exactly what the best framework to adopt might be, but I'm thinking that the city should adopt a framework. So if we have an ordinance that says that the city will adopt a framework, appoint a chief information security officer, which could be an existing employee. I'm not saying we need to create a new position for this, but we need to task some position in the city with implementing this ordinance and enforcing it and making sure that we are meeting the goals of whatever framework we adopt. And to assist with that, I'd like to see in the ordinance a requirement starting in 2025 or thereabouts, time so we can We can figure out how to fit it in the budget. External auditing and penetration testing on an annual basis. Partnering with an external third party like that, like we do with the accounting ordinance, would allow for the MIS staff, the Chief Information Security Officer, to get feedback about how we're doing, meeting the goals of this ordinance and this framework that would be adopted. And then that way, it can help plot a path as to how to improve security within the city. And I think that putting something like this on the books, I looked around, I couldn't find any other cities or organizations that have something like this, but I think if we're a leader on this, that's not a bad thing. So that was kind of just my thoughts on that, and I don't know if anybody would like to make any comments or ask any questions or try to dive in. Councilor Mercier.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think everything that you said, I concur 100%. We don't have it in place right now, a framework, an ordinance that frameworks this. I think it's a good start. I think to go once a year to you know, see that everything is in order and in place, that's not a bad thing. That's check, check. You know what I'm saying? There's no harm with that. But what happened to us in the city with the cyber attack trickles off into other areas as well. And let me give you an example why. Wherever I seem to go lately, people are telling me that their bills are coming in later and that they fear they may be charged for late fees. I personally feel that if this is happening, that is no fault of the taxpayer, the resident, the property owner, the utility person for the city that has different bills in the city, not just taxes, but I think it's not their fault. And I don't feel that they should be charged for a late fee for something that they had no oversight in through no fault of their own. So if we could check that out and make sure that people that are getting late bills are not assessed a fee, because I hear this from many, many people, no matter where I go. If I'm in a supermarket, they stop me, and I'm sad for them, and I don't know if it's happening. So I know we can't log it into the computers at one point, but if we can just check on that, because there's a trickle-down effect, and this is bothering me because it's bothering them. Thank you. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mercier. Councilor Newton, anything you'd like to add?
Thank you. I appreciated your initiative on this. I also like to see to hear if any from the director of MIS and what he thought about it.
Sure. Mr. Fernandez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trying to think of where to best start. So prior to the cyber incident that we had, I was invited to sit on a steering committee for the Commonwealth. The federal government made millions of dollars available to the states, specifically to meet the challenges related to cyber incidents. Because they've been increasing, they're taking place regularly, daily, in all the different industries. The government is not sole in that case. As you've heard, insurance companies recently, financial institutions, lots of places get caught up with cyber incidents on a regular basis. So I've been sitting on this steering committee with the Commonwealth, where the Commonwealth is working on a plan to provide assistance to all 351 municipalities in the Commonwealth. And that plan that we have been meeting on monthly includes a variety of things, including penetration testing, including ways to subsidize certain tools like multi-factor authentications that many municipalities don't have or don't have implemented to the extent they could. Working with the state and with EOTS, we actually have the Secretary of Technology from the state coming out on Thursday to meet with us here at the city. We've been looking specifically at many of the items you've already mentioned in terms of a framework, in terms of NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They have a variety of frameworks out there. There's one called NICE. There's a bunch of them out there that are geared for for organizations and their workers to learn about security, but there isn't anything specifically targeting municipalities. So that is something that we are working on at a overarching statewide level at the Commonwealth on coming up with a plan. It is a multi-year grant opportunity for the states. So we're looking at establishing an initial grant with specifically targeted items that include tabletop exercises for municipalities to really understand what to do in the event of an incident. In our case, we had a basic plan, and we enabled the plan, and we went through, and that's how we were able to lock everything down and move forward in the recovery. Many municipalities don't have that. So when we look at a overarching policy and framework, there's a couple of different elements. There's the policy element for the organization. One of the things we do right now is training. We participate in the Commonwealth's training. Unfortunately, not everyone does, and that's because there's no carrot and stick. There's nothing to say if you don't do it, then something negative is going to take place. They want it to be voluntary. They want everyone to take and participate in the cyber training because it not only helps the organization, but it helps you in your personal life because the attacks occur at work, they occur at home on a regular basis. So we're trying to figure out ways that we can really emphasize the training and get folks to get trained and increase our training numbers overall in the organization. But it's something that could be subject to CBAs, could be subject to a variety of other things in terms of how can you get folks to comply with that. There's been a suggestion that it be handled at the Commonwealth state level, similar to how the ethics training takes place or how the open meeting law training takes place, where it's in the Mass General Law level and it's just required for everyone to do it, and that would certainly facilitate that to ensure everybody does it. But that's one element. Another element internally, as you were mentioning, Chairman, about the policies the city has for auditing. The city has several frameworks that it participates in, like the CISO framework, and there aren't any specific frameworks in municipal governments that relate to cybersecurity. However, there are best practices. So things like coming up with penetration testing, where you engage a third party to attempt to penetrate the city, to get into the city. There are many organizations within the Commonwealth that do assist with that right now, and the reason I'm choosing my words carefully is because there's like the MSISAC, the Multi-State Information Security Group. There's Homeland Security. There's the FBI. There's a lot of these folks, and they're all trying right now to coordinate and coalesce around many of these grant opportunities through the federal government to help municipalities do exactly what you're trying to do, achieve an opportunity to establish policies, put the policies in place that'll work, identify how they can work, whether it's penetration testing, whether it's changing out your authentication methods, incorporating multi-factor authentication at every level, every opportunity, whether it's looking at how to establish the knowledge base you need for security personnel to be able to function within an organization like a municipality, which unfortunately can be expensive. And costs are something that we're hoping we can leverage through the state with these grants to help us in that direction. But by all means, I've taken some of these notes to Councilor Mercier's point. I will find out about any late bills or late fees. I'm not aware of any. I'll speak to the CFO about that. I'll have him work with me. I'll work with him on assessing if that's happening, where it's happening, how it's happening. I'm not aware of any that have taken place with late bills because ever since the incident occurred, we always had the facility online for payments. So Invoice Cloud was always up and running. I know that some folks complained that, oh, are they safe? Yes, they're safe. They function completely separately outside of the city and follow federally mandated financial guidelines that ensure their safety, and everything handled through them has been safe. And everything has been processed through them and is processed backdated to when it's downloaded to make sure that it avoids any kind of fees, late fees, interest, et cetera. But I will make it a point to reach out to the CFO and follow back with you, ma'am. But in regards to other elements of establishing a foundation. I think it's a great idea to establish a policy, to incorporate it into the city's policies, like the ones that are published with the city budget book, and to look at how we can implement them, hopefully leveraging funds from the Commonwealth as much as possible, because the Commonwealth's overarching view on cybersecurity and how to leverage federal funding is something that's currently got a big spotlight on, and they're looking to have rolled out later this calendar year as the federal funding year begins for the federal government.
Great, thank you. Councilor Noon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very happy to hear that there's multi-year grant out there to meet the challenge of, cyber-related, and also that you work with them and they will put out some plan down the road. It sounds like you are no oppositions to having an outside audit to look into how we're doing. Maybe every year, maybe every other year, having that ordinance in place, similar to how we have outside audit for our finance. Is that what I'm hearing?
That I'm in agreement with it, yes, sir.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Solicitor Williams, would you have anything to say? What's your first impression of whether an ordinance like this would be something we could put together at the city, and how effective do you think it might be?
Sure. So I'm in agreement with, from what I could understand of some of these discussions between those of you who understand it better than I do. I'm definitely in agreement with trying to put together something. I think it makes all the sense in the world. We do it in other areas, so it makes sense to do it here. I was surprised that you said you weren't able to find anything in other municipalities. I believe you. I haven't looked into it either. I would think that there are other cities, towns that have at least broached this topic or looked into it, and if they haven't, that's fine. If we're going to get out in front of it, I think that's a good thing. Sometimes it is helpful to see what other places are doing to kind of help guide us, but if that's certainly not an obstacle to putting an ordinance together. I'm happy to work closely with Moran. He has a lot of the institutional knowledge on these things, but I'm happy to do whatever I can to make something like that work. I think it's definitely in the best interest of the city.
All right, thank you very much. There very well could be something out there. I'll admit I'm probably not the best ordinance finder. Certainly, I would defer to your skills on that. Councilor Mercier.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, through to Moran. Now, I'm a novice. I know nothing about, I know what you do is mind-boggling downstairs in MIS. I know nothing about this. So as a layperson and a concerned resident of the city, I may be asking you crazy stuff, but is there something that the city, after what happened to us, that we're putting something on our system that prevents this from happening again? Like, is there a program that we can buy somewhere that we're putting in our system that would stop us from ever having this happen again? I don't know, but someone cyber attacked and get into our system. Is there a program out there or a device or something we can put to stop someone from doing that? I don't know. Do you understand what I'm saying? I don't even know how to explain it. But
Sure.
Mr.
So
Fernandez.
I wish I could tell you that there was X thing we could purchase, install, and we'd be done. The fact of the matter is that the approach for security is typically not a function of if we get a cyber incident, if something happens, it's more a function of when, because these things are prone to happen. When will it happen again? We don't know.
But it could happen again?
It could happen again. There's no guarantees. There are things we can implement to avoid it from occurring, but the variety of pieces involved in this are not just a computer program or equipment. A lot of times it's people. And that's where the training comes in, so that people don't, for example, go someplace, click on something inadvertently and download something or allow something to manifest itself within the system. So there's multiple components, but to answer your initial question, there are tools we've put in place. I want to back up and explain, we had a variety of tools in place. It's not that we didn't have tools in place. We had many state-of-the-art tools in place. But many times the tools change. They evolve over time. Many times they evolve to try to keep up with the bad people out there that are doing things. So as things evolve, many times the tools evolve. So the tools that we had in place did help us in many ways, but there are newer tools that we have implemented that we believe can help us better. I can tell you that from the tools that we have installed, we have been able to firsthand see, oh, hey, look, someone's trying to attack us right now since we installed the tools. And we've been able to isolate, stop, and defend ourselves. So they have already bared fruit in terms of the software we've bought and we've installed has already helped us and helped us identify
That's
other
good to know.
attempted attacks.
Well, that's good to know.
But I need to back up and say that what happened on April 24th is still an open and ongoing investigation. We still meet with the FBI, Homeland Security on a regular basis. And because of the nature of it being an open and ongoing investigation, calling it an attack, calling it a hack, calling it one thing or another can be misleading. So that's one of the reasons why we call it a cyber incident. A lot of folks online have said, oh, someone's trying to blow smoke and, just deflect, etc. A lot of folks in the industry are calling these cyber incidents now as opposed to saying, oh, it was a hack. It was this type of attack, that type of attack, this or that. Because many times these incidents involve more than one type of thing. The saying, there's many different ways to slice a cake. Well, there's many different ways for these cyber events to occur. It could be somebody clicking on something. It could be somebody actively trying to attack you. It could be a combination of that. It can be a variety of factors. So that's why we tend to call it a cyber-related incident. Did we have something take place on April 24th? Yes. Was there some data that was supposedly lifted and pushed out onto the internet? We can't answer that 100%. We can tell you that there was data that was found out on the internet that did appear to come from the city. We can't say that it occurred on April 24th. We can't say that it occurred on April 25th or that it occurred on April 23rd.
Did the people that cyber attacked us, did they request any money?
No.
They did not? Okay, thank you.
No. And I'm not going to say people or groups. I'm just going to say that the cyber-related incident, as we recorded with the FBI, who was here that very day, and as we discussed with Homeland Security and with other agencies that we've been interacting with, they have reviewed what happened, how it happened. We're working with a third-party forensics team to identify how it happened, to make sure that everyone is clear as to, well, did this or that lead to it? How could we avoid that in the future? But when we discuss these security matters, they're typically security matters that we're very tight-lipped about, simply because of the nature of being security related and not wanting to tell folks, oh, hey, this is what you want to do to try to attack us in the future.
Sure.
Similar to prior motions that have come up in the past where folks have asked for information. I know there's a prior motion that was spotlighted in the Sun about information that took place during the election period. And there was a question at the time, Councilor Conway had asked about a bunch of security questions that were specifically related to election devices and the fact that we don't have election devices interconnected or whatnot. And we discussed security at that time too.
Yes.
But we have a strong security posture. What took place on April 24th is not reflective of a lack of security or a bad security posture. What we have done since then is double down on strengthening our security posture throughout the organization.
And I want to publicly thank you and the MIS department for all the hard work that they did. This was not easy, and I know you worked practically around the clock, so thank you for your dedication to the city.
Thank you very much, Councilor. I'd be remiss in not pointing out that it's a lot of people that have been involved. And it's MIS departments from City Hall, from police, from fire.
Sure.
Everyone's been working. Up until this past weekend, we had completed 45 calendar days nonstop of work on this until we finally got to the point where it was like, okay, we can take a weekend off and actually
Yep.
rest. But it was 45 calendar days straight of working on this to get to the point where we're at, which is much better. I don't want to say better as in it was worse before, but it's much better than it was 45 days ago.
Sure, thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you. Councilor Gidger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Moran. So I'm just confused a little bit. Is this an ordinance or is it a standard operating procedure, that's being developed here? Because it's kind of pulling both ways, because you got Plan E on one end, and then you have operations on the other. And to me, it sounds more like a standard operating procedure than an ordinance would need to be developed. Prior to this cybersecurity event, do we have standard operating procedures downstairs that maybe force employees to renew their passwords monthly? And if they don't, are we firm enough to say, look, if you don't do it, then we're not going to renew. You're just going to get shut out until you actually do that. I think that as we look at this, I'm not sure, and I don't know, I would ask the chairman, why an ordinance and not SOPs that spell out them? And I'm not sure what the differentiation is between, I understand one's going to have more power, it's going to be on an internet, but I'm not sure if that's a good place for it, because it should be more in the background of there, and I'm not sure. So I guess through you, Mr. Chairman, to Moran.
That's an excellent question, Councilor. And what I would recommend and suggest is, because of how I'm working with all these municipalities, many folks we have a very tight set of computer use policies here in the city. We implemented these in the past 20 years. They have evolved over the 20 years. They they change on a regular basis. They're very fluid, keeping up with technology, whether it's social media practices, whether it's password policies, whether it's device use policies. Most municipalities, what they do is they have a framework within those policies, but I suspect that what the chairman is talking about that might distinguish the policy from the ordinance might be, yes, we have policies in place that are best practices for operational use of our technology, but maybe, and I'm not saying either way, but maybe having an ordinance that strengthens the posture for the organization overall might be helpful. You might find that it makes more sense to incorporate it into the policies. I don't know that, but I can certainly speak with other municipalities, many of which have actually borrowed our computer use policies and implemented them in their municipalities in the Commonwealth.
I guess most of the discussion that I've heard is more about operating procedures than ordinance procedures. That's why I'm trying to differentiate the difference between me and where we're going with it. I don't disagree that there can be an ordinance made, a vague one that strengthens something else within the system, but most of the stuff we've talked about is about operating in procedures that force not only users but end users, residents, to do a certain procedure before they get to that ordinance. And that is my only question. And I do think this is a great discussion, because if there's some tool that can strengthen MIS's stance and it's an ordinance, then certainly provide that. But I'm just trying in my mind to figure out where we are in the difference between the ordinance piece and the operating piece, because it doesn't have to be an operating piece where someone resets a password, but it can also have strength in the fact where we look at certain things within these SOPs in between. So that's just my question to you, the maker of the motion.
If I may. That's a great point. I'm just curious whether it might make sense, in looking at this holistically, looking at maybe the MIS where it's defined in the ordinance already, and maybe just looking at how that can be further strengthened to say, well, you know what, within MIS, within the domain of MIS, maybe ensuring that these practices are followed, and then that way you're leveraging the operational elements while strengthening the actual legal ordinance elements.
Sure. So the reason that I kind of proposed an ordinance was really, as I mentioned earlier, the accounting ordinance we already have that's on the books that defines how we do our accounting, and it also defines the need for an external audit. My concern about just putting things in policy and procedures, particularly an audit that I feel is extremely important and should be done on a regular basis, is it would be very easy for that audit to be cut if it's in a procedure. I think the audit needs to be in an ordinance. I think the city council needs to say, we think this is important, and we would like to see the city do this on an annual basis. And having it in an ordinance protects that, in my mind. I would in no way want this ordinance to prescribe exactly what MIS is doing. You know, we're not going to define a password policy in this ordinance. I would see this ordinance as very high level to say that we have a chief information security officer who's appointed by the city manager, who's responsible for the implementation and the enforcement of this ordinance. And then we have the requirement that the city adopt a framework, not going to prescribe one, but you know, MIS should work with the legal department to choose one and adopt that, inform the city council that, you know, what they've chosen, and then the auditing can happen going forward. That's my thought on it. I'm happy to, you know, have this discussion and go in another direction. Councilor Getcher.
Mr. Chairman, I just would caution just that we would use the city solicitor in this piece because the auditor, the clerk, and the manager all work for us. That's why the auditing piece would be in an ordinance, because the auditor falls under us, so that purview falls under the city council. Now, MIS does not, so that's where the crossover, I'm just thinking in the Plan E form comes into, and I just wanted to make sure that we look at, can we do this by an ordinance when there are 3 employees that fall under the city council, the auditor, the clerk, and so some of their roles will be defined in ordinance because we can't set the SOPs. I guess we probably could, but the SOPs are basically set in ordinances. So that's the only question that I had to it. I think this is a great discussion. I think that SOPs should be revisited all the time like this. And you know, I think that we learned obviously a lot over the last 45 days that are going to change the SOPs that are current and maybe write better ones. I'm just not sure that like we could take a piece of the DPW and put it into an ordinance to hold, you know, part of the operations within. And that would be my question, just for the city solicitor to look into in the future. And you're probably very well right because you're well rounded in this. So that's the only thing because of the accounting piece. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I you know, certainly defer to the city solicitor on this kind of stuff, and you know, I'd like to see the ordinance structured in a way that is tasking the manager with doing this stuff. He's probably going to delegate it, and that's fine, but it would be the manager who would be officially tasked with these responsibilities. Councilor Noon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do. You know, here, Councilor Pichia is concerned. We're not going to do away with Plan E government, you know, and we're not going to do away with, as you stated, Councilor Pichia, is the SOP, the standing operation practice. In fact, we should enhance that going forward as a city, making sure that all departments do, you know, as you subscribe them to do, because you are the expert in this field. Having another layer of check is a good thing, and if anybody was to be able to kind of direct us in that area would be the city solicitor, and of course working, this should be under the purview of the manager. The managers, you know, relinquish that responsibility to the MIS director, which he should, because he's the expert. So I think we should have this. We should have this going forward, and giving that the urgencies of doing that. You know, if Mr. Chairman don't mind, I would, you know, in the form of motion, asking that the directors of MIS and the city solicitor working together in drafting this ordinance and come back to this committee and to have this committee review it before we get to the full council. Thank you.
And I'll second that. Did
Thank
you
you.
get that, Michael?
We need a roll call on that, Mr. Clerk? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, well, I thank everyone for coming down tonight. I think that's, unless anyone has anything else they'd like to add, I think that might conclude it, and I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much.